Hello, everyone. I hope you're feeling well and having a peaceful day. Today, we're going to explore a heartfelt story where quiet love, hidden sacrifices, and long-buried secrets slowly come to light. When two people try to protect each other while the past threatens to pull them apart. What truth is powerful enough to stand between love and family? Stay with us to uncover every emotional moment. And if you enjoy meaningful, slow-burn stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our upcoming videos. In the weak winter sunlight, the small warehouse feels crowded, not just with goods, but with a damp, earthy smell that clings to the air. Ginger, potatoes, and the faint scent of soil that refuses to fade. Diep stands beside an old wooden table, its surface worn smooth by years of use. In her hands is a crumpled notebook, the pages bent and soft from being opened so many times. Her voice is gentle, almost shy, but beneath it is a quiet pride she can't fully hide. She tells James that after subtracting all the expenses, the profit comes to 90 million dong. James looks at her, listening closely. He notices the small details first. The way her lips are cracked from days of cold wind, the redness at the corners. Without saying a word, he turns and walks toward his car. A moment later, he comes back with a small bottle of lip balm and places it into her hand. No explanation, no comment. Diep pauses, surprised, then smiles softly. They decide to wash the car together. Water pours from the hose, running across the concrete in thin streams, carrying dirt away little by little. Their laughter is quiet but genuine, especially when James glances at the notebook again and shakes his head in amazement. Just a few days ago, Diep could barely read or write. Now every number, every date, every expense is recorded neatly, carefully aligned, as if she poured her determination directly onto the page. James stands close, wiping the windshield with a cloth. The glass slowly clears, and with it, something inside him feels lighter. There's a warm swelling in his chest, pride mixed with a tenderness he doesn't try to hide. Diep looks up at him, her eyes bright despite the cold. "I learned fast, didn't I?" she asks, half teasing, half seeking reassurance. He smiles, still focused on the car, but his heart answers louder than his words ever could. In that simple space, between stacked crates, cheap soap foam, and the echo of water hitting the ground, their love feels uncomplicated and deeply real. It's like a small flame, steady and quiet, burning through the heart of winter. James wipes away one last smudge on the car, the motion slow and careful, just as he has always tried to wipe away the invisible scars she carries inside. A light winter breeze passes through the open space, carrying the scent of wet earth and soap. It feels like a promise that even the dirtiest, most worn things can become clean again when two people work together with patience and care. As the afternoon light fades, long shadows stretch across the damp concrete. James moves to the front of the car, wiping it down slowly. Diep stands beside him, her voice softer now, tinged with worry. "You should sit down and talk to your father," she says, "so both of you can feel more at ease." James stops. His gaze drifts past the warehouse, toward a horizon blurred by mist. He admits quietly that they still haven't talked. He's living in that house, but it feels like he's only passing through, like a stranger under his own roof. The silence that follows is heavy. The drip of water from the hose sounds unusually loud, each drop echoing in the space between them. Diep steps closer and lightly touches his arm. Her hand is cold, and her voice trembles just slightly. "I just want you to find peace," she says. James turns toward her. His eyes are tired, rimmed with emotion he's been holding back for too long. He knows she understands his pain better than anyone else, even while she herself is under pressure. From his family, from circumstances she never asked for. Standing there beside the still wet car, with the cold slowly seeping into their skin, they don't need promises or dramatic words. What they share is quiet understanding, like two puzzle pieces trying to fit together, despite unseen walls pressing in from all sides. James gives a faint nod. He doesn't say anything, but inside, her words move through him like a warm breeze, cutting through days of bitterness. The wind carries the scent of soap and wet ground, a reminder that even the coldest silences can soften when someone truly cares. Later, in a small coffee shop, glowing with warm golden light, Diep sits across from James. The light reflects off her face, catching the moisture in her eyes. Her voice is slow and careful as she talks about the days when he wasn't there. She tells him how she handled everything alone, learning how to calculate numbers, forcing herself to speak to customers even when fear made her throat tight. She admits she doesn't know where that strength came from. She only knew that if she didn't try, there would be no money for Nye's school fees. James listens, his fingers tightening around his coffee cup as something heavy rises in his chest. When Diep says, "I could go hungry, earn nothing, but I had to keep going for Nye," his breath catches. Then she looks straight at him. Her voice shakes, but her words are firm. "You helped me change," she says, "from a poor, illiterate girl into who I am now. Thank you. I want to work harder, to be worthy of being your wife." Her words cut through him like a blade, sharp, painful, and strangely sweet all at once. The cafe seems to fall into silence. Only soft background music and the sound of their breathing remain. James reaches across the table and gently touches the back of her hand. He doesn't speak, but his eyes say everything. Pride, love, and a deep ache for all that she's endured alone. Outside the glass window, the winter wind blows, scattering dry leaves across the street. They move like old memories, slowly fading as something stronger and more genuine takes root between them. Time seems to slow, allowing her gratitude and his silent devotion to settle into the space, warm and steady, like sunlight on cold stone. The mood grows heavier when Diep brings up the past, how James's father once hired someone to stop her from seeing him, demanding that she end the relationship. James lowers his head. When he speaks, his voice is low but unwavering. He explains that he came back not for money or status, but for his worried mother and the workers who were waiting for him. He looks directly at Diep, his eyes clear with resolve. "If I wanted everything back," he says quietly, "I wouldn't have chosen you. I chose to trade it all for you. That's why I had to come back." The words land between them like a vow, firm, honest, and edged with pain. Diep listens without interrupting. Tears slide down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from being deeply moved. "I don't blame you," she whispers. "I just want your mother to feel at ease, and I'm glad you're home." James reaches out and gently wipes her tears away, his touch careful, as if she might break. Outside, night has fully settled. Street lights cast long reflections across the table. They sit hand in hand, surrounded by pressure, unanswered questions, and unspoken fears. Yet their love stands steady, like a lighthouse cutting through a dark sea. "I'll find out why my father opposes us," James murmurs. "But don't worry, I won't let you get hurt again." In that quiet moment, wrapped in honesty and vulnerability, they seem to glimpse a narrow path forward, through old prejudice, through shadows left by the past. The cafe's soft hum fades into the background, leaving only the sound of two hearts beating together, calm and unbreakable. The rural market hums under the pale chill of late afternoon. Vendors call out their prices, voices overlapping, while white puffs of breath rise into the air with every word spoken. Diep sits beside her small stall, stacked with fresh oranges, their skins bright against the muted winter tones. She peels one carefully for Ly, her movements practiced and gentle. "Eat slowly," she says softly. "These are really sweet. We picked them fresh from our garden today." Ly sits on a tiny wooden stool, her feet dangling as she bites into the orange. Juice runs down her fingers, and she laughs without restraint, the sound cutting through the noise of bargaining and footsteps. Diep smiles at her, then turns back to her customers, selecting the best fruit, weighing it carefully, and handing it over with a warm nod. Her fingers are numb from the cold, but her voice stays steady and kind. Between customers, she feeds Ly another segment, then reminds her gently, "Sit nicely, sweetheart. Auntie still has to sell." People come and go, some haggling, some just asking questions out of curiosity. Diep answers them all patiently, her smile never quite fading. When there's a brief pause, she pulls out her phone and calls James. There's a trace of longing in her voice as she speaks. "If Uncle James is busy, eat first. We'll wait for you." She ends the call and looks down at Ly, brushing a bit of orange fiber from the child's chin. Her eyes shine, filled with love and a quiet ache she doesn't put into words. The winter wind moves through the market, carrying the scent of ripe oranges mixed with distant kitchen smoke. In that ordinary scene, Diep stands like a wildflower growing between stones, bending but never breaking. Every orange she peels for Ly feels like a small promise, a piece of hope placed gently into the future. As the sun sinks behind a grove of bamboo, the light softens, painting Diep's silhouette in gold. She keeps waiting, her posture calm and steady, her heart firmly anchored to the man still occupied somewhere far away. Night falls quickly in the countryside. Warm, yellow light spills from the small house on the farm, pushing back the cold darkness. James steps inside, greeted by the familiar aroma of home-cooked food. John welcomes him with an open smile, clearly proud as he gestures around. He points out the neat rows of vegetables, the soft chirping of chicks in their pen, and the pig rooting contentedly nearby. They sit down at a simple wooden table, lifting their glasses in a quiet celebration. James looks around, genuinely amazed. The place feels alive, organized, productive, full of care. It's hard to reconcile this scene with the man John once was. "You've changed so much," James says honestly. "I almost don't recognize you." John chuckles softly. He talks about the lessons he learned in prison, about being given a small piece of land to work, about the strange peace that comes from watching seeds break through soil. His words are calm, without bitterness. When their glasses clink together, the sound feels like a small declaration of hope. James listens, warmth spreading through him as he realizes he's witnessing a rebirth. Outside, the winter wind howls across the fields, but inside the house, friendship, and gratitude keep the cold at bay. In that moment, James understands something deeply. People can change. They can rebuild themselves, no matter how dark their past once was. John meets his gaze, eyes filled with quiet appreciation. "I owe this to you," he says simply. James smiles, but his thoughts drift to Diep, the woman who, in her own way, is also transforming every single day because of love. The lamplight flickers above them, shadows shifting gently along the walls, like promises that second chances are real. After the table is cleared, the mood grows more serious. James hesitates, then asks softly about the past. John goes still for a moment, staring into the distance. When he finally speaks, his voice is slower, heavier. He recounts what his father once told him. Their two fathers, he explains, were once close friends. They worked the same cornfields, shared meals, and eventually invested together in a small woodworking factory. Trust was strong back then, but a contract was signed, details buried in legal language, and according to John's father, James's father deceived them. The result was devastating. John's family lost everything. James listens without interrupting, his chest tightening with every sentence. John continues, lowering his voice. His father once mentioned that Diep looked strikingly like her mother. He hinted that James's father may have known Diep's mother long ago, though the truth was never clearly explained. Silence settles over the room. The fire crackles softly, the only sound breaking the weight of the revelation. James sits motionless, his thoughts racing, fragments of memory and suspicion colliding without forming a clear picture. He feels history pressing down on the present, on his relationship with Diep, on every harsh word his father has ever spoken. John watches him closely, understanding written plainly on his face, mixed with regret for reopening old wounds. Outside, the winter night roars through the trees, as if whispering secrets that refuse to stay buried. James finally stands. He clasps John's hand firmly. "Thank you for telling me," he says, his voice low but sincere. He steps out into the night. The cold air hits him immediately, sharp and unforgiving. Above him, the sky is clear and filled with distant stars, indifferent to human pain and confusion. As he walks, questions churn inside his mind. Why does his father oppose Diep so fiercely? Is it pride, guilt, fear, or something far more personal? The mystery follows him like a shadow. It feels like an old wound, reopened before it ever truly healed. But beneath the weight of regret and doubt, there's also resolve. For Diep, for the future they're trying to build. He knows he can't turn back now. The wind moves beside him, carrying echoes of unfinished stories, urging him forward into whatever truth lies ahead. That night, under the cold, watchful stars, James walks on with a heart full of questions, but also with hope, determination, and a love strong enough to face whatever answers await.